Hello folks, this is David Hurley of EasyChessTips.com, and today I'm going to look at a game I played with my regular chess partner Dr. Mogami on Wednesday the 16th of May 2018. Dr. Mogami was white and I was black. I was trying to use the sniper system advocated by Charlie Storey. However, Dr. Mogami has developed an opening against the sniper, which isn't included or isn't discussed in Charlie's book, The Sniper. And so I was left on my own to fend for myself, and really I screwed it up. But Dr. Mogami didn't take advantage. He should have won this game, but I survived and went on, in fact, to win it. This is what happened. We have a d4 opening, and I responded in true sniper fashion with g6. And then this is the move that is not discussed in the sniper, probably because we don't see it very often at the highest levels of chess. But nevertheless, it is quite a challenging anti-sniper move, I feel, and that is c3. Now, the following move pattern, bishop to g7, is the common second move in the sniper, and here you have the pawn chain ready to fend off that bishop. Now, the second feature of Dr. Mogami's anti-sniper defense is opening up a fianchetto over here for the bishop. And I wasn't sure how to respond. I don't think my response was very effective. The computer recommends here this knight to f6. And in fact, if I look over on the GameNot database with this pattern here, let's just move me over, with this pattern here, knight to f6, this move here has, there are 382 games that have been played, and white has only won 34% of them and black has won 51%. So it looks like this is the go-to move, at least on the GameNot database. However, I didn't do that. I wanted to, so the sniper, third move of the sniper is c5 here, but I wanted to, before putting that in, I put in d6 to build up towards that c5 move. However, Dr. Mogami then moved his bishop over. So this nice line here, looking at this pawn and the rook, with this bishop now kind of committed to defending that pawn for the time being. I blundered on with my c5 move. This bar here shows where the advantage lies in the game, and you can see that white has a small but significant advantage at this stage in the game, according at least to the computer. The next move was bishop to e3, which I was quite surprised by this move, and as you can see, the computer doesn't really like it very much. White now has a very small advantage. I think the problem with this move is that it hems in the central pawn here, hems in this e pawn. And it also weakens this pawn over here. So I responded by sending my queen out to b6. The queen moving out here to b6 or a5 is something that seems to happen quite often in some versions of the sniper. So anyway, my queen is now eyeing up this pawn down here. The system, interestingly, recommends that you ignore that threat and attack down here. But Dr. Mogami responded by moving up his b pawn, which then kind of weakens this pawn structure here, so giving black a small advantage at this stage. The system is recommending that knight to f6 move, which seems to be the go-to move, but I came out here with this knight, concerned about covering my pawn and enabling my rook to get out of the way. That was followed by knight to f3, I brought my bishop out. The system doesn't like it very much. You see the black bar moves down. It's in fact once again recommended get that knight out. It's saying get that knight out. However, there is in the sniper right at the end, Charlie talks about I don't know if you can see here the English opening. Where's it gone? The English opening. The English opening. There it is. The English opening, a simple sniper antidote. Now, the English opening is a different opening from the one we're dealing with here. The English opening is more like this. Start again. Get that over there. So the English opening is a C pawn opening here. And Charlie recommends pure sniper treatment, as he calls it, like so. The English opening then goes with the fianchetto here. So this is the common point it has with our game. And then bring in the C5. So C4, G6, knight to C3, bishop to G7, G3, C5. What's the point of all this? Bishop here, knight to C6. So bringing that knight in here. Knight to C6, knight to F3. And then he has this little move in here, B6, to strengthen this pawn here. And white castles. And the bishop is on here. So we get this double sniper, as Charlie calls it. Yeah, the bishop to B7, E3, knight to F6. So there's that knight coming out. And B3. And then knight comes into E4. Knight to E4. Sorry, knight to... Now what's going on here? Knight to E4. Did I not do the proper move? Move not found in database. Okay, so we're off the database set of moves. Yeah, this setup has happened 9 times on GameNot, and white has a 44% record and black only a 33%. So ways around it have been found by GameNot players, perhaps because the black player doesn't know Charlie's sniper sufficiently well enough. Anyway, let's get back to the main game and see how things developed. Next, I moved my bishop here, as I said, and the recommended move is a castle, is that white castles, but the d pawn advances to attack my knight. So what's happened is this: the central diagonal, the key diagonal of the opening, has been somewhat blocked off now by a lot of other activity happening in the middle. What happens next? Next is knight to E5. The computer is recommending that the knight takes the knight. However, another knight is developed here to D2. I take the knight, go check. The bishop takes the knight. The recommended move was the bishop takes the knight. I then pick up an extra pawn down here, but the computer's not overly impressed with this move. I still have a small advantage, but a slightly diminished advantage, even though I've gobbled up a pawn. But that's because the computer is recommending this rook move over here. But Dr. Mogami castled out of trouble, increasing my advantage as I can pick up this rook. But now the key move of this game, the move which got me into trouble, from this point on I started to blunder my way through the game. This move now, the computer still gives me an advantage after white's queen takes my bishop and gets onto that nice long diagonal there. So you have this queen absolutely dominating this diagonal, which is probably worth a rook for a bishop exchange. Now, the computer system has recommended the advance of this pawn, which looks perfectly reasonable. However, I didn't do that. I moved out my knight, and that immediately gives Dr. Mogami a key advantage. If you check how things go here, if I'd gone for this move here, it seems my advantage would have been maintained. But I guess I was thinking about developing pieces rather than considering the preferable defensive aspect of moving that pawn out. So that didn't happen. Unfortunately, I developed my knight and lost my advantage as a result. You can see things are going to break up. You've got this rather dangerous bishop here, which comes into play. Interestingly, the system doesn't think that was so great. The system is in fact recommending a pawn advance against my bishop here. So there we are. My advantage is somewhat restored by two blunders, I guess, or two less than ideal moves, one by each of us. The system is recommending that I castle, but I was worried about that queen on that diagonal, and now it looks like there's a double attack on the knight. So I did castle, but I castled the other way, reducing my advantage in the process. Now, this series of exchanges means Dr. Mogami's queen breaks in, picks up a pawn, so there's black still has a small material advantage, but this positional play, this queen breaking in here, became very worrying for me. In fact, it gets me into trouble. I should have lost the game as things developed. The system is recommending this move, but I worried about this queen breaking in. I bring back my queen. You see my advantage is diminishing. The system is recommending moving this rook over here. But what happened? Is that what happened? What happened is I moved my queen here, and in fact, now Dr. Mogami makes a lot of the key good moves that he needs to make to turn this this game with this strong queen into a winning game. And I do not make the key moves to defend well. So the system is recommending that the h-pawn advance, but I'm still faffing around with my queen, trying to improve my defense, but actually committing several grave errors. Now you see white has a nice advantage. Dr. Mogami does the recommended move, advances the b pawn. What do I do next? I don't do any of the recommended moves, and my advantage gravely diminishes. Yes, Dr. Mogami follows the computer's recommendation, and so do I there. And here, okay, here it would perhaps have been better to have moved this up. But that didn't happen. We have instead this move. But I think moving the knight forward gets Dr. Mogami into a winning position. We now got this pawn here becomes a key defensive battleground. We've got a queen and a rook defending, a knight and a queen attacking that pawn. And the computer is screaming at me, why don't you move your rook into the center? Do I do that? No. I have this blunder, this massive blunder of a move. Look at this. The game practically collapses. I've got my eye on this pawn here, and I'm trying to strengthen it, add extra ballast to the defense by moving the king up. But in fact, this pawn is already well enough defended. If the rook takes, the queen takes, the queen takes, if the knight takes, the queen takes back, the queen takes, the rook takes. And so, yeah, it's this pawn is well enough defended, in short. However, I move my king up, and that's a disastrous move. Dr. Mogami does the recommended move, pawn to e4, attacking my bishop, which only has that place to go, further increasing Dr. Mogami's advantage. And again, he does the recommended move, very nice, attacking that pawn. The computer is still screaming at me, bring your rook over, but in doing this, if you look up here, it tells you white now has checkmate in 13 moves. Let's look at what they are. Well, first of all, let's see what happens here. By taking, white now has checkmate in 12 moves. So queen takes, that was the correct move. But I escape from checkmate. And we'll have a look at that in a moment. So queen, I move my king back. It's still checkmate in 12 moves. The computer says, and this is where now Dr. Mogami begins to go wrong. The computer is recommending, well, for guaranteed checkmate, that you get your rook onto this line here. Obviously, as you can see, getting the rook here is a very powerful line, hemming the king in completely. The king is now unable to move, and this will lead to checkmate. But that did not happen. Instead, we have this move. So I'm still in deep trouble, but the threat of checkmate in 12 has been removed by this advanced pawn. So let's look at what happens if Dr. Mogami had followed the checkmate in 12 pattern. He comes there, and the queen then moves across. d6 now comes in, attacking the queen. Counterattack on the queen with the rook, but the queen comes straight down here, checking. Sorry, the bishop comes down here, checking the king. The king has to move up here. The queen comes in. My rook lunges down there in a desperate attempt to stave off checkmate. Is taken. My bishop now tries to attack the queen, but the rook takes the bishop, a sacrifice. The pawn takes, but now we get the knight comes in with a check. The king has only one place to go because this square is covered by the queen and the knight and the bishop. The king retreats down to d8. The queen can now take that pawn check. The king runs up here. The queen comes across. The king keeps running away. And we're very near to the end now. There we go. Check. The king comes back. And the queen comes in. And that is checkmate. The king cannot take the bishop because the knight is guarding it, defending it. The king can't move here because the pawn is guarding that square. And so that's curtains. However, that set of moves, fortunately for me, did not happen. We had d6. The pawn moved forward. What did I do? I get myself into even more trouble by finally moving the rook, but doing it at the wrong moment. It's now an even worse situation for black. It's checkmate in 4 if white takes this pawn. And this is where a massive blunder occurs. Let's just see this. Checkmate in 4. The queen takes the pawn. Check. King is forced out there. The rook comes in. Check. The queen has to defend. So the rook picks up the queen. The king can't take the rook because of this bishop guarding the rook. And so the king is forced into the corner, at which point, goodbye, black. Nice to have known you. But fortunately for me, this set of moves didn't happen. There were only a few minutes left on the clock at this stage, so we were both trying to preserve time by moving as quickly as possible. I think there are only about 5 or 6 minutes left at this stage. So what do we do? I move my queen across, inviting the pawn to take it so we can do a nice queen exchange and hopefully blocking the pawn's path with the king. And although I have I'm at a terrible disadvantage here, things begin to look up. That move is put in. Dr. Morgami finally gets that rook on that file. I now bring my bishop back, attacking the queen, but at this stage it's checkmate in 3. I'm really hanging on, hoping that the bad moves are not noticed. 1, 2, check. In comes the queen. And goodbye, black. It was nice to have known you. But fortunately for me, that didn't happen. Instead, we had my bishop attacks the queen, pawn takes queen, rook takes queen, rook comes in with check, king takes pawn, and you can see I'm recovering from the brink here, still at a disadvantage, but I'm recovering thanks to the oversights towards the end of this game. Now, we're offering here a set of exchanges. Check. Now, the computer recommends that I block, but just attack the rook down here. And yes, Dr. Morgami gets in that move. Now, the computer is recommending that I take the rook, and there's a kind of rook exchange. However, I wanted to, first of all, get that free bishop. Now, if there's a rook exchange, the game is back to a slight advantage, I think, for black, with the extra pawn here. But black, yeah, this is a mistake. Is it not a mistake? The knight should surely grab that. It should be a rook exchange with the hope that this knight can somehow blockade or prevent the pawn from promoting. But Dr. Morgami is looking probably to check down here. And so the sequence of events now begins to move finally back in favor of black. So there's a check here. Take. So I'm now a pawn down, so that should mean that Dr. Morgami has the advantage, except that my pawn down here on the c file is advancing towards promotion, while Dr. Morgami picks up the extra pawns. A check here to slow things down and enable me to advance my pawn. Now there's a series of useless checks, which only help me to, here we go. So a check here, I move down here, now I can't be safely checked. So Dr. Morgami moves across to grab another pawn while I bring my pawn down here. This king is very well placed now, thanks to those checks, defending access squares to the access square to this pawn. So the rook is kind of hemmed in. Now 1 square away from promotion. The rook gets the pawn, but it's all pretty useless because the king can simply keep marching down the board to safety. So now the rook cannot check. There's no way to prevent this pawn from promoting. And so we have now from here, black can get to checkmate in 9. I did achieve checkmate. So here and then here. I actually did it in 2. So that's checkmate. So really, it was a game of blunders, mistakes, and oversights, and from White's point of view, missed opportunities. Even though in the middle of the game, I think White played quite well, and Black's opening leaves a lot to be desired. The sniper, it's a fine system. It's really part of it's a kind of variation on the modern opening. And it has a lot going to it. It's very enjoyable book to read, by the way. But and I use the sniper especially against d4 openings. Against e4 openings, I'll usually use the French defense when I'm playing black. So yeah, the D4 C3 anti-sniper is something that I want to talk to Charlie about when I see him in the summer. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that analysis of the game. That's all from me, David Hurley of EasyChessTips.com.